Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the final part of our pest education seminar on termite biology and control. Before we get started, let's go over a few procedures. Please, everyone, mute your line. You can use the chat box to ask questions. For any additional questions not answered during the webinar, please email us at education@nola.gov, and this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Today's topic is protecting your trees. And today's speaker will be Drs. Catone and Drs. Janowicki. Mark Janowicki is a research entomologist who has worked with the City of New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board since 2020. He has always had an interest in insects and studied termites throughout his degrees. He currently leads the termite division for the city, which protects city facilities and historic buildings and trees. Mark also manages the molecular laboratory, which conducts pathogen surveillance in mosquito, rodents, and rodent or ectoparasites, genetic resistance screening of mosquitoes and rodents, and population genetic analysis of termites. Dr. Carrie Catone has worked for New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board since 2005 and currently serves as Assistant Director. She has a strong background in urban entomology with emphasis on subterranean termites. Dr. Catone managed the Termite Control Division for New Orleans from 2011 to 2020. She received her PhD from the University of Florida in 2011 as a student of Dr. Nanyao Su. Her dissertation work was determining survival mechanisms of Formosan subterranean termites during times of flooding. And now, Dr. Catone.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Yeah, so when it comes to talking about termites and how they infest trees and how to control them, really we are talking about, our focus here is going to be on the Formosan subterranean termite. Okay, these are the ones, they'll readily attack trees and they will cause extensive damage. Okay, so I'm going to do a little review on the differences between subterranean termites and drywood termites so everybody can be on the same page. So like I said, we really are going to be focused on subterranean termites for the day. These are all in the family Heterotermitidae. These are the ones that will nest under the soil surface and within trees and lumber. They will need a constant moisture source. Okay, drywood termites are very, very different. They're all in the family Calotermitidae. They will be living entirely within the wood that they're feeding on. So they don't require that soil contact, and they're getting all of the moisture that they need from the wood that they're feeding on, the humidity in the air, and their own metabolism. So these subterranean colonies, because of their nesting behavior, they're all underground. They can spread out over a much larger area. They can have very large colonies. So you can have several million individual termites within a subterranean termite colony. Okay, and when we're talking about termites in trees, of course, we are going to be focusing in on Formosan subterranean termites. So these are actually much different than our native termites that we find here in Louisiana. So the colonies can be much larger with a greater soldier to worker ratio. Okay, so you'll have a lot more soldiers in the colony, and they're much more aggressive than our native termites are. So if you find a shelter tube, also called a mud tube, and you break it open, you will find soldiers just come teeming out of there. And a lot of times they will try to pinch your fingers and they will exude this white sticky fluid from the top of their head. Okay, so that's a defensive secretion. Our native termites don't have that. And a lot of times their soldiers will run away when you break open those shelter tubes. So those poor guys are kind of seen as wimpy termites compared to these Formosan subterranean termite colonies. Their swarming season, as you can see here, it's a little bit different. So we are just now entering in the swarm season of Formosan termites. They'll be swarming in the evenings from now till June or July, whereas our natives will swarm earlier in the year from January to April, and they'll swarm during the day. Another interesting thing about Formosan colonies is they do have the capability of building aerial nests where they don't necessarily have contact with the soil, right? So as long as they're getting enough food and moisture where they are, they can start a colony and create their nest there. Okay, so morphologically, our Formosan termites look a lot different than our native Reticulotermes species. So again, if you are looking at morphological differences, you either want to look at the soldier caste or the reproductive caste, right? So these workers look very, very similar. But as you can see here on the Formosan subterranean termite soldier head, it's very teardrop shaped and they have these nice, long, slender, sharp mandibles. Whereas our native subterranean termite soldiers will have a more rectangular shaped head capsule and these thicker, blunter mandibles as well. So that's one main difference there morphologically. Also, if you ever have the pleasure of looking at a termite alate, one of the reproductive swarmers, under a microscope, you will see that Formosan subterranean termite alates will have wings that are covered with thousands and thousands of little tiny hairs. So that's a very good indicator that you are dealing with a Formosan subterranean termite here in Louisiana. Okay, so just a quick review of termite foraging. Their foraging behavior is very, very important when it comes to control. Okay, so let's keep in mind that they are going to feed on anything that has cellulose in it, cellulose being the carbohydrate that makes up the plant cell walls. So we're talking not just wood, but paper, even the paper backing on sheetrock, um, any kind of wood furniture. So just keep that in mind when it comes to termite control. Okay, and subterranean termites, right? They're underground. They can have multiple satellite nests because remember they can have multiple kings and queens within a colony, and over time, their foraging area will be spread out, and you'll have multiple nests, multiple food sources that they're feeding on, and they're all going to be distantly connected through their underground foraging territories. So again, trees are important, right? Because if a termite colony is feeding on a tree, even though that's a food source that can sustain them for many, many years, they're still going to be foraging out from there. And if that tree is next to your house, you could really end up with a problem there if they're foraging and then they locate your house as an additional food source. So their tunneling behavior is really for resource acquisition, right? So if they're underground and they're foraging out, they're always looking for additional food sources. When they have to go above ground, they will build these shelter tubes. They're also called mud tubes, as you can see here and here on the bark of a tree. And these really help protect termites. So it maintains a warm temperature and a high humidity for them. They are very soft bodied insects and they are very prone to drying out quite easily. So they need to maintain that high humidity at all times. It also provides physical protection. One of their biggest predator is ants. So it does protect them from other insects when they are above ground. They infest trees from really the inside out. Okay, so they will consume the heartwood first, and if they're left undisturbed for many years, this damage can be pretty drastic and very damaging for that tree. So we've seen many times where termites will hollow out a tree. Here you can see this is a pretty badly damaged tree that's being taken down here, but sometimes, we do get hurricanes and, those strong storm winds, once they hit a weakened tree that's been weakened by termite damage, it's very prone to coming down during that storm as well. So they can also eventually fill the interior of the trunk with their carton nest material and mud. And they can grow into a massive colony with millions of individual termites within it. Okay. And we've kind of talked about this. This is another tree that came down during a storm that they're cutting up right now. But you can see the center part of this tree, that is all carton material and mud brought in and built by the termite colony that was infesting that tree. It was pretty dramatic damage. And damage to properties, it can be a lot more expensive than treating the tree by a licensed operator. And remember, if something like that damages your home, it's not necessarily going to be covered by homeowners insurance if your insurance company says, well, it's completely termite related, right? Because termite damage is not covered by homeowners insurance. And the damage can be pretty catastrophic. So it's really a good policy to check your home insurance policy and your vehicle insurance policy to determine if something like this would be covered. Again, if termites are damaging this tree in this picture here, and that branch comes down, lands on a car, it's a matter of, well, is the insurance company going to say that that was just a tree branch falling on a car, or are they going to try to say, well, no, that was termite damage, and termite damage isn't covered? So you might want to check on your policy. And there's a huge economic importance of termites here. We've seen this slide, I think, in every presentation in this webinar series. So it is a multi-billion-dollar business nationwide dealing with termite control. And we're just not just the treatments, but the repairs, right? The damage that these termites can cause can be pretty massive. Trees in New Orleans, $6 million spent annually on damage caused to trees by termites. And trees, excuse me, are quite important in New Orleans. They help make up this iconic landscape that we have with all of these really old live oaks. There's also a lot of urban beautification efforts that are made using trees that are actually can be quite expensive to replace. You know, $10,000 to replace a tree infested by termites. It's a lot cheaper to treat it in the first place. We also have historic trees. So some of these live oaks are several hundreds of years old, and they've been named, right? So they have very specific historic designations to them, and these are absolutely irreplaceable as part of our iconic landscape as well. Here you can see a picture of a very massive tree, right? So there's a truck in the picture for scale, and there's a meter stick here, it looks like. And the interior of this tree was so hollowed out by termite damage that it did have to come down, unfortunately. But you can really see how hollow that center is and how much damage that was just at the base of the trunk. And that termite colony had gone vertically several feet up into that tree. And all different types of trees are attacked by termites, right? So subterranean termites, Formosan subterranean termites, I should say, are known to cause damage to anything from oaks to cedar to cypress, sycamores, and so on. A lot of ornamental shrubs and fruit-bearing trees. And I've been asked the question on several occasions, you know, well, I've always heard that cypress is a termite-proof tree. And I have to say, unfortunately, no, I don't think I will ever say that a certain tree species is termite proof. No tree that grows here naturally should ever be considered termite proof. And at this point, I'm going to let Mark kind of take over talking about tree inspections and foam treatment. So let me stop sharing my screen, and Mark, I'll let you take over for a little bit.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to kind of transition into talking about tree inspections. So why are tree inspections important for a homeowner? Subterranean termites, as we've gone over, they're constantly foraging, constantly looking for a food source. They continue foraging even after they hit that food source. A termite colony that's housed in your yard may be the one that's also feeding on your house, but maybe one that in the future will be feeding on your house or might be feeding. To find these, we can look for infestations on the trees. Luckily, this time of the year is the best time of year to try to find these termites, as they're very active and trying to get ready to swarm. So we can find these a lot easier in the spring. We can look for these signs of infestations, including mud trails in the bark. So just like how they have to get up into your house, they can have these mud trails going up the bark connecting the tree. When you look in close, you'll see these little mudded areas as they're going. You can locate the mud trails on the bark, scrape to expose some of those termites in there, and then see the termites that are moving around inside. They'll also have, as I was mentioning, getting ready to send out alates. So they'll have these dispersal structures, and these can be on scars from cut limbs or different areas in the tree. But these are basically launch pads for these termites to make their way out of the colony and find their way. And then we can also look at the base of trees and some of the nooks and crannies at the bottom, probing around with the stick here. You can see this area might be prone to termites at times. If you need to, these infestations take extreme measures to find. So this is Barry from our group climbing up a tree trying to find termites and successfully finding them up higher in the tree than you can see from the ground. If they can't be detected on the outside, they still may be on the inside. And we talked a little bit about borescopes when we were inspecting, but we can use one of these borescopes or a flexible video scope to look inside the voids and galleries and see what's going on inside of the tree. So this is a video of one of those borescopes, courtesy of Ed Freitag. So you can see as we get inside, there's many, many termites inside of there moving around as we go. So as we get to the center, you can see there's many, many, many termites. The whole nest is inside of here, and this tree is definitely infested, despite not really seeing these signs from the outside. So once we find termites in a tree, there's a few options for treatment. We can use a liquid termiticide applied inside the tree as a foam, a liquid termiticide applied in the soil as a perimeter around the tree. It's the same way you can do for your house to keep them from accessing the tree, or termite bait stations placed in the soil around the perimeter of the tree. So which one's better? Which one should you use? Obviously, the objective for both methods is to mitigate the damage just done by removing the termite threat. So we can't heal the tree, but we can stop them from continuing to damage the tree. For foam injections, a central void is required. This is good for trees that are too small to drill or too large that they would need more than 5 gallons of mixed termiticide to fill that entire void with foam. It's also possible or not possible to use these foam injections for fruit-bearing trees as this is against the label. So as always, when looking into treatments, make sure to read the label. The label is the law. For baits, a central void is not required. So in a tree that might just have a small infestation that you can't get to the void and treat, this can be suitable. For ones especially that are too small to drill or too large to foam. For fruit-bearing trees, with the exception of above ground stations, and for palm trees, as these should never be drilled, as they're a different structure. It's not good for drilling. So to foam a tree for termites. So the first step is to locate the cavity. So as you can see from this cross section of the tree, there's a lot of damage in the middle. And as you drill through, you can tell there's a difference in how robust this is. As you go, you'll have no resistant felt while drilling. So as you reach this point there, you won't feel the drill is taking as much time or force to get into the middle of the tree. Large trees may require an adapter to reach the void. This is a kind of a extreme example. Although in this case, this might be a case that it's easier to treat with baits compared to trying to drill all the way to the center of this tree. So to locate these cavities, we use a gas-powered drill with a reverse function to help you from keeping it stuck, getting the bit stuck in the tree. Drill as deep into the trunk as possible, trying to get into the central void. We use a 1/2-inch holes with a wood chip auger bit. So the wood chip auger bit on the left here has the small kind of screw on the tip. This really helps it get in a lot easier and works better that we found for drilling trees. In between treatments of trees, you want to clean the bits with 10% bleach. This is to try to keep from bringing different plant pathogens from tree to tree. Our goal is to have 4 access holes at the base of the tree and 4 holes at chest height in order to add the foam from all directions and make sure we're really giving a robust treatment. We then mix the foam and insecticide. So we use water, a liquid termiticide. For this, you want to have residual cover after the foam dissipates. And again, always follow the label, wear PPE. Some examples here are Premise, Termidor, and Phantom. We use a foaming agent. So this is basically soap that you put in to make this expand. We want to get about a 15-to-1 expansion ratio. And again, follow the label for this agent as well. When we're doing this, we need to calibrate. So to calibrate, we can test with 1 gallon of product into 3 5-gallon buckets. So remember, we had that 1 to 15-gallon expansion rate. So if we have 1 gallon of product, we should be able to fill 3 5-gallon buckets and produce 15 gallons of film. We also want to make sure we have the right foam consistency. So the foam consistency should be dry, like shaving cream. If it's too wet, it won't move up the tree. We need to add more foaming agent. So again, make sure that this is working well. You kind of test the foam to make sure it's coming out at the right consistency before just applying it into the tree and risking having it all just go down to the base. Apply the insecticide into the void. The foam is applied to all access holes. You can see here berries foaming on one side and then the foam's coming out the other. So it's good to do this and not just alone, and keep track of other holes that you may have drilled in the tree as it'll come out from other sides. We can then cover these holes with rubber or plastic plugs if the foam does come out, although sometimes you'll see, like in this case, there was a big scar, a big open area here on the tree, and the foam's coming out there and it's very difficult to plug. As a goal, we have a minimum of 5 gallons of solution per tree. So this is 75 gallons of foam, which should be sufficient to fill nearly any void size. And then we follow up with inspections annually to make sure the termites haven't come back. And just to reiterate, the foam does kill the termites, but the tree does not heal itself. So it's important after the treatment has been done or before, to make sure it's worth it, to contact an arborist who has experience in the tree to make sure that the tree is still structurally sound in their opinion, because we will kill the termites, but the tree will not regrow back the part that's been destroyed. So this is another borescope video. This time we're inside of the tree and the foam is being injected from the other side. So you can see the termites are busy moving around. The foam comes in kind of like a tidal wave here and is contacting all of the termites in this area. So because it's a foam and it's filling the whole area, these termites can't just go to higher ground to avoid it. That area is also going to get them in contact with the insecticide, and every surface of this area will be fully covered by the foam. So you can see termites are trying to escape, but the foam will get them in the end. Okay, so next I'll pass it back to Carrie to talk about bait treatments. Oops, Carrie, you're on mute.
Oh, I am on mute. I'm so sorry. Okay. So if there is a tree that is infested and it's not a good candidate for foaming, maybe it's too large, like Mark said, or it's a fruit-bearing tree, something like that, or a palm tree, baits are your best bet. And so what do baits really do to a termite colony? So I talked about this at pretty good length last week. But just to review, let's keep in mind that termite colonies can contain millions of individual termites. So that colony can really be viewed as a large organism in and of itself. Okay, so you have a queen constantly producing eggs, and colonies can have multiple queens within the colony as well. So Formosan subterranean termite pressure here in New Orleans is incredibly high, as it is in other parts of the US. And that means that you can have many, many colonies in a relatively small area. So because of this, the risk of termite attack is really increased. And baits, when they are put in the ground, exploit the natural social behavior of termites. Okay, so you have foraging termites underground that are constantly foraging, and through their natural foraging tendencies, they will end up locating these bait stations. Okay, so workers will start feeding on the bait and they will lay down pheromone trails, letting others know that, hey, that's a great place to find a food source. And that encourages other individual termites to start feeding on the bait as well. And then what happens is, because termites are in such close contact with each other, they even feed each other. Okay, so you have an exchange of not just regurgitated liquids between colony members, but food sources as well. And some casts can't even feed themselves. So the workers have to feed the queen and the tiny larvae, because their mandibles are not sclerotized enough to feed themselves. And they also have to feed the soldiers. So their mandibles get in the way, the soldier mandibles get in the way of them being able to really break off pieces of wood, or in this case, a bait product, and feed themselves. So the workers will provide food to them. So in this way, individual termites don't have to feed directly from the bait in order to be affected by the active ingredient. The workers are feeding on the bait, sharing it throughout the colony, and that's how the bait's active ingredient is dispersed. And there are plenty of commercial products out there available to use. The ones that most people are familiar with are either the Centricon system or the advanced system from BASF. Those two active ingredients, the Novaluron and the Novaflumaron, are chitin synthesis inhibitors. And what that means is that once a termite consumes it, they can no longer produce chitin, which is needed to molt to create that new exoskeleton. And because termites will be molting throughout their lifetime, if they can't molt, then they will end up dying. So characteristics that are needed to have a very effective bait system in place. For one, there should not be any kind of feeding deterrence. So these bait manufacturers always do palatability screenings to show that termites will feed on the bait and they are not deterred from it at all. Baits should also be slow acting. That's another thing that product manufacturers look for. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but if you have so many termites feeding on the bait in a certain area and they start to become sick or they die close to that bait station, that will actually deter other healthy termites from feeding off of that bait station. Okay, so, and also with a fast acting insecticide, these termites don't have as much time to interact with other members of the colony before they end up dying. And these baits are also dose independent. So it doesn't matter if a termite consumes a lot of the bait or just a little bit of it, it's still going to have the same effect. So we've kind of discussed this before. Active ingredients for baits in the past have been things like metabolic inhibitors and juvenoids. But really since the late 1980s, we've been seeing an uptick in these chitin synthesis inhibitors being put on the market. Like I said, with the Novaflumaron and the Novaluron, I think those are the two that most people are familiar with. And no matter what kind of bait product you're putting in the ground around a tree, it's going to be very similar in the installation process. Okay, so depending on the size of the tree, you'll want to put anywhere between 4 to 6 stations around there. And what you'll do is you'll create a hole in the ground either with a hand auger or a gas-powered drill with a larger bit than what Mark was showing, right, like a 2.5-inch bit. And you'll create a hole in the ground where the station can be placed. And then you're going to want to insert that station into the soil so the top of that station is flush with the soil surface. You don't want it sticking up out of the ground. It'll get hit by lawn mowers. People will mess with it. Dogs can dig it up, that kind of thing. And you want to use baits for trees that really would not be good candidates for foam. Okay, so if there's no central void, if you cannot find a central void to foam, you'll want to use a bait. If a tree is too small to drill, or if it's so large that it's going to require way too much of the mixed solution to fill that void, you can use a bait. And then some tree species should not be drilled or treated with a liquid termiticide. Palm trees is one of them. Palm tree is not really a tree, it's like a giant grass. Those should always have bait stations around them. Those are not good candidates for foaming. Also fruit-bearing trees, like Mark said, you want to follow the label. The label is the law. So you would want to use bait stations around fruit-bearing trees, not a liquid termiticide. So here's a picture of some folks from our group installing advanced bait stations around some trees at Delaronde and Chalmette. So these were very historic trees. And you can see a bait station is being installed right here. Bait stations are being prepped right here. And this is me from many, many years ago, actually marking that tree for data collection purposes. In City Park, we see a lot of live oaks that are very, very old, and they are so large. Here you can see Barry in the picture next to that tree for scale. This tree is way too large to try to use a foam injection to treat termites that are infesting it. And so the use of baits was placed around it. And also another thing about the bait products is if we have these historic trees that are hundreds of years old, they're completely irreplaceable. people get a little bit nervous when you start trying to drill into them anyway. So baits were a very good option here. And, sometimes with these live oaks, these branches get so large and heavy that they end up coming from the tree and end up back on the ground. Okay, so right around here, you can see a bait station right there. So you can even put bait stations around where these limbs are touching the ground. So one quick tip, if you're installing bait stations around a tree, you want to put them as close to the base of the trunk as possible. Okay, you will get better hit rates that way. Termites won't have to forage out as far from the tree to find your stations. But the thing about trees is they have these roots that are impossible to drill through, even with a gas-powered drill. Nor do we want to be drilling through tree roots either. So if you find yourself drilling to put bait stations in the ground around a tree such as this, and you hit a root, instead of taking a step back, my suggestion is take one step to the left or to the right, because if you just keep stepping back further away from the tree, you could be following that root all the way and you'll just keep hitting it. But if you move a little bit to the left or to the right, there's a good chance that you will find adequate soil to place a bait station. Okay, so above ground bait stations can also be used on trees. Now, not all bait systems have this as an option. Okay, but this does allow for very targeted application. So if you know a tree is infested with termites, if there's a mud tube on the outside of that tree bark, this is a perfect option to use. So this is something where you can take bait product where in this example, it's in this box structure right here, where this box is containing bait and it's put directly over a termite mud tube. So you remove that lag time that it would take termites underground to forage and locate those bait stations before they start feeding on it. So this is direct application of bait onto active mud trails, but it does require more frequent inspections to make sure that those termites are still feeding. There's a lot of flexible station placement, so you can put it low, close to the ground, or you can put it up higher if that's where you're finding those mud packs and mud tubes. Okay, it also fits that population management concept where you're looking at targeting entire termite colonies and not just individual termites as well. Okay, so trees that are associated with structures, we keep saying that, yeah, if there's a home and it's either being inspected or treated and there's trees on that property, you also want to get a good look at those trees, inspect them and treat them as necessary. But you always want to check with the label, the bait manufacturer or the state regulators when applying bait around a tree. Okay, because not all products can be used the same way. You always want to read that label first. So an example of this is if you're using the Centricon system around a home and you're installing it around a home and you want to treat a tree that's on that property as well, according to the product manufacturer, it states that you can treat that tree as long as there are bait stations around a structure associated with that tree, okay? So you can't just treat the trees. You have to treat the structure as well. Whereas the advanced system is completely different. You can put bait just around the trees that you know are infested, and you don't necessarily have to apply bait around the structure as well. So always make sure you're reading that label. And for homeowners, we really do encourage that you take a look at trees on your own on your property and keep an eye out for those swarm structures that Mark was showing you pictures of. Now's the time to start looking this time of year. And also to start looking for those mud tubes. You might see them at the base of the tree, along the bark. And if you haven't really had the conversation with your pest management professional about it, it's a good idea to have them come out and inspect your trees. If you have questions about termites in your trees, and if you find termites on the outside of your tree, say you find some mud tubes or some swarm structures, you'll want to notify your pest control company right away. Okay, and if you're concerned about the structural integrity of a tree that you know has termites in it and you're not sure how much damage has been done, then you'll want to speak to a licensed arborist about that. Okay, and keep in mind that even if they take the tree down because of a termite infestation, you're still going to want to treat that stump. You can still put bait stations around it. That's a fantastic option to have, because the inside of that tree is not going to contain the entire termite colony. You're still going to have foraging termites, underground nests, some satellite nests, and those termites left behind are still going to continue to forage. So a couple of considerations, just like Mark said, once the damage is done, it is done. Treating a tree for termites, it's never going to heal a tree, but it will mitigate the termite infestation and prevent further damage from happening to that tree. Because once termites are located in a tree, like, the damage is done. Don't panic, and it's also not a do-it-yourself type of job. Let the professionals do the work. They have more tools available, they have the product knowledge, and they have the experience to do the job. So in summary here, tree inspections are incredibly important for homeowners, especially those that are in close proximity to structures, right? So trees can be treated through different options. We've talked about foam injection with termiticides and using bait systems. And really, which one you use depends on the size of the tree, whether or not there's a central void, and the tree species, and the discussion that you have with your pest control company, of course. So at this point, I invite anybody who has questions to go ahead and pop those in the chat. And Mark, since I have you on the line too, do you want to give a nice little synopsis of what we're looking at on the screen here? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Too many screen. Yeah, so we have our swarmometer showing here. So we actually just got the swarmometer set up for this year. So the swarmometer is a sticky trap that we put under a light in our garage here at our administration building. And what we're doing is monitoring the number of alates that are flying each night. We'll probably wait a little bit to post until we really have some swarms, but we had some good rain and it's pretty warm out again. So we are starting to monitor. We've seen some in some of our other traps around town. But yeah, we'll be keeping an eye out and then putting this on our social media. So be sure to follow us at NOLA Mosquito, whether it's just a few all the way up to termite date night. We also want to plug our upcoming rodent biology pest education seminars. So these are, again, the same style here. There'll be a 4-part series starting, I guess, next Thursday, May 1st, a week from this Thursday, and then run May 1st, May 6th, the 13th, and the 20th. So you could scan the QR code down there in the bottom for more details and to sign up.
I checked the chat and I don't see any questions. So once again, I want to thank you guys for joining us this evening. Like Mark said, please join us for our upcoming rodent seminars, and I'll email everyone the link to register for that who joined us for this seminar. Thank you guys again and have a great evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.